Neil Martin, Director of MBR Partners, is here today to give us advice on general behaviour in interviews and interview etiquette. Hi Neil, so what preparation would you recommend a candidate does prior to the actual interview?
Well, I'd always recommend a candidate prior to going to the interview should do as much research into the company as possible. By that I mean doing a lot more than just simply going on their website. Really try and get a feel for that company and where they're going. To do that, I'd recommend taking a look at some of the videos that might be available of key people within the companies, look at the management team, try and look at the financials if they're available in a public company, and look at what they're doing with regards to marketing and maybe Twitter feeds and things like that. All of that should give you an impression as to what that company is about and the challenges they have. And if you're engaged with a recruiter like MBR Partners, really do try and get a good feel from the recruitment agent as the competitive landscape that company is involved with. They should also be able to give you some key details like the company's size and where they really want to take the business moving forward. I would strongly recommend as well trying to get a feel from the recruiter as to the nature of the people you'll be meeting and the cultural fit between you and the business. Now, one of the other things you can do is simply go on LinkedIn and see if any of the people that you're meeting are connected with you in any way, shape or form, because that can always start a meaningful engagement in the interview itself.
Okay, well, one of the very common questions is how to actually dress for an interview.
Okay, well, the answer is conservative. And by that, I mean definitely be wearing smart clothes. I don't like wearing ties, but I would always recommend to wear a tie for a first interview. Regardless of whether or not the company has a dress down policy, always look smart for that first interview. And also, don't go in too smart. By that I mean if you turn up wearing a three-piece suit and some extremely expensive shoes, again, that really doesn't say what you need to say about yourself. You want to remove the dress as part of your interview process. You just want the interview to be focused about what you can do as a person for that company, not what you look like.
Okay, is there anything you should bring to an interview with you?
Definitely bring copies of your CV. I think that's an essential thing to do. Always turn up 5 minutes beforehand, not half an hour beforehand. There's absolutely nothing more irritating than running a series of interviews and having interviewees turning up ridiculously early and then just hanging around. Really come 5 minutes beforehand, well prepared, and also do not bring things that you have not been requested to the interview. I've sat in on a bunch of interviews recently where people have come up with presentations that really haven't benefited them at all. You just go off at a tangent and lose track of what the interview is all about, which is how do you fit into that business.
Okay, is it okay for you to ask questions during the interview?
Yes, definitely. So treat the interview like a sales process. So ask questions throughout the interview, not just at the end. So you should be asking questions about what exactly the client or employer is looking for, and then fitting yourself in the best possible way to those requirements that they have. So very naturally, the interview will come towards a conclusion.
Right, okay, so what are your big don'ts during an interview?
Okay, well, do not speak in one long monologue and get drawn into conversation that is irrelevant to the discussion. So try and keep your interview answers as crisp as possible and as relevant as possible. We've covered already in this series of discussions about how a CV should be structured. So try and apply the same sort of logic to how you're answering the questions. Really don't go off on a tangent, just try and stay on track. Other things that I've seen in the past is that generally employers will ask candidates about their potential weaknesses. Now, my advice would be to try and come up with some rather superficial answers for that question, because that is one of the questions that quite often leads to a candidate opening up in all the wrong ways. So, if you want to make a light-hearted joke of it and move on, then that's probably the best way to handle that. But really don't get drawn into the depths of any particular issues or personality traits that might put doubt into the employer's mind.
Okay, so salary discussions can be quite sensitive. How would you go about those?
I would be open and honest. Ultimately, the chances are that whatever you say in that interview, if you're successful, will be referenced upon anyway. So I would give your current salary package exactly how it is, but say, obviously, to move, I'd be looking to delta up from where I am. And also, whilst that is a motivation for me, I would also then at that moment say it's not the only motivation I have, and mention other things that makes the job attractive. No employer really wants an employee that's just looking for money.
Okay, and finally, how would you close off an interview?
Well, really, as I mentioned earlier, treat this like it's a sales process and you're selling yourself. So I would strongly recommend people to close the interview. And by close, I mean simply asking, i.e., what is the next steps in the process? And now you've met me for an hour or so, do you think I'm a good fit? That will give the interviewer the opportunity to come up with some reservations which you can handle there and then. It's much better to do that rather than let those questions stay at the back of the interviewer's mind and potentially turn your application into a no.
Brilliant, that's great, Neil. Thank you very much.